I'm Daniel and I'm 48 years old. When I was 18, I met my first love. 3 years later, we got married. I was only 21 years old. At that moment, I was sure of myself. Yep. I was in love with my first wife. We decided to build a life together. At the beginning, everything went fine, of course. We got married in 1972. The first 10 years, or perhaps the first 7 or 8 years, went well. We were young, we had everything going for us, we had children, we had positive experiences. When the second child was born, we looked for a place to build a house. We saw perspectives, our thoughts were occupied. My wife worked and she lived for a job. I always said, and I still say it, that maybe she was married to her job and not to me. There was a lack of communication in my first marriage. We only talked about trivial things. If there were problems, things I felt really concerned about, it didn't seem that important to talk about them. In fact, I didn't feel that lonely with my first wife. I mean, I was able to find compensation elsewhere. Then I told my ex we couldn't continue like that. We're always complaining about each other, I said, because you do one thing and I another. At one time, a third child was on our mind. I would have liked a third child in our family, and maybe it would have saved the situation. But now I see it's perhaps better that we didn't have another. I didn't really discuss it with her. I just let things go on as they were. Everything that happened in our lives was focused on the children. In fact, we did little for each other. The moment I really became desperate and decided to end our relationship was about a year before I met Lut. There was something breaking in me. I expressed it to a friend I could talk with and with whom I sometimes went out. The last straw was in '87, at the time when I met Lut, and I decided immediately to end my marriage. I didn't know Lut well. I'd only seen her once. It meant a lot of pain for the children. It was the only concern that continued to upset me. A divorce means saying goodbye to an episode in your life and turning your back on it. For months I had guilty feelings towards my children after I left them. I thought I'd proved that I was a bad father. Afterwards, Lut and I talked about it to help me get rid of that sense of guilt. For a divorce is not just one-sided. In all the years that followed, I never again had any contact with my ex-partner. We could never communicate again, not about the education of our children or about the agreements that had to be made. I knew I had to go through the court to sort out the measures needed, such as the right to visit, because otherwise I would have had problems. I just couldn't talk to her.
I am Lutgard, 47 years old, born in Zotchem. I met my first husband while studying at university. After graduation, we were married. I was very assertive, I was a real go-getter. But inside, I wanted someone to lean on, who could be my shield. If I didn't do what he expected, including a lot of things he should have been doing in the house, if I didn't do all that for him, he always said, "You're useless." Whenever I felt there was no understanding nor a willingness to listen, I broke down. Then I would keep it to myself and feel bottled up. Small wonder that I became depressive. I felt I was someone who was only good for doing the work, not worthy of love or affection or appreciation. I couldn't stand it any longer.
Ik voelde me op de duur als iemand die alleen maar diende om alle werk te doen, zonder daar een greintje liefde of genegenheid of waardering voor te krijgen. En dat kon ik niet meer aan. Ik heb nog van alles geprobeerd. Ik ben opnieuw in therapie gegaan.
I tried everything.
Betrokken.
I went for therapy. I involved him in it, but he couldn't see that he'd done anything wrong.
Dat hij niets verkeerd deed.
Oh yes, he didn't find anything unsatisfactory in his behaviour.
Dat er bij hem iets fout
He
ging
had
en
the impression that it was I who felt sick and felt no good and who wasn't satisfied.
En niet tevreden was,
So I continued the
heb ik
therapy
therapie
alone.
alleen verder gezet. Ik kon dat niet verwerken.
I couldn't put up with it.
Ik,
I really
was
had married for love.
uit liefde.
I couldn't live with a man whom I felt really didn't love me, who didn't understand me. I couldn't stand it any longer, mentally, physically and psychologically. And that's why I took that step in my life.
Mentaal, psychisch en fysisch niet meer aan. En daarom heb ik die stap in mijn leven gezet.
For years I worked in politics. I was very active in it. I immersed myself totally in order to escape. The appreciation, the affection, the friendship I found in all those activities outside compensated for the fact that I didn't have them at home. Until I came to a moment where I found it didn't add up
En die
anymore.
compenseerde blijkbaar. Tot ik op een moment gekomen ben dat ik vond dat dat niet meer opwoog. Ik zocht een diepere
I
waardering.
searched for a deeper meaning in my life. I wanted to live as a happy human being. I wanted to build up true happiness. At that moment, all I had was vested in my two children. I had no thoughts of a new relationship. On the contrary, at that time I didn't want a new relationship.
Wou ik zeker geen relatie. Ik heb heel wat schuldgevoelens gehad naar mijn kinderen toe.
I had a lot of guilt feelings towards my children for taking them away from daily contact with their father. Not because of any material help he might have given them, but because of the father figure they were missing. I've always said that I grieve that I had to take that step, but I had no other choice. I did it with a knife at my throat because I found I couldn't raise my children in such an atmosphere of conflict and intolerance. Everything I did in my life was more or less successful, but the most important thing, a happy relationship, a good family, had failed. In the circumstances, I think it's evident why I was not inclined to start a new relationship. I was scared of failing again, of making another wrong choice. The fact that I met Daniel was not a coincidence, I think. It's something very beautiful and I'm thankful to God for it. In my deepest sadness, I thought I'd never succeed again. I learned a lot from my previous relationship. I told myself I would never ever make the same mistakes again as I did in my first relationship. The missing factor was communication. Now, to compensate for that, I make a point of talking about every problem. It's important that love is expressed, is shown. I missed that enormously in my first relationship. And that's what I now appreciate in Daniel. His daily affirmation, his way of showing affection, his appreciation. All those things are a new experience in my life.
Lute and I have had 7 beautiful years with the children. We've always had 4 children, Lute's 2 children and my 2. They love each other like brothers and sisters. We never had arguments with them. Every weekend they spent with us was totally dedicated to them. We always try to put them together, and it's always gone very well. When Lute and I began to live together, our oldest child was 25 and the youngest was 7. So they were in a crucial phase of their education.
We always try to make decisions together. I think this is because we had so many problems in the past. Now we say, we don't discuss little things. We don't have to be perfectionists or fussy about every detail. It's obvious that this is straightforward and doesn't need discussion. About big things, we talk.
Over the years we've learned to know each other. A number of times I asked Lute to marry me, but I realised there were a lot of problems which had to be sorted out before we could take that step.
The moment came when we could draw a line under the previous relationships and put them behind us. Then I told Daniel, if you want, we can marry now. And we did. To marry Daniel was a new awakening in my life. I was surprised to see it happen to me. I experienced it much more intensely, with much more awareness than my first marriage. I was as glad and as happy as a young newlywed. And yet, to me, it's not even that bad that we couldn't marry in church. I didn't have the courage to apply for an annulment of my first marriage in church because I couldn't go through all that pain and misery again by going back over everything.
We want to show the parish community how happy we are together, and how happy we've been for so many years. We want to give God his due, because he supported us in everything.
To me, God is a God of love, a God of forgiveness, who sees us human beings as small and sinful, but who also accepts us. I'm sure God doesn't condemn us. God wants us to be happy. For ourselves, it was a second celebration of marriage. I promised, and it sounded a bit strange to be promising it again, for better, for worse, till death us do part, for the rest of my life. I regret my failure in the first relationship. Sometimes I really don't understand what went wrong. But it's over now, and my promise towards Daniel is for the rest of my life. We will make a success of it together. Then we can forget the previous failure.